Content warning. The subject matter in this video contains material that may be difficult for some who are sensitive to matters such as gun violence and school shootings. If you do not wish to hear more regarding these topics, I advise that you do not watch this video. Hi there. This is a great undertaking, and I'm your host, Mr. Doyle. On this channel, I am exclusively discussing the works of Stephen King and their countless adaptations in the chronological order of the original book or story's publication. In this video, I will be discussing the novel Rage, which was originally released in 1976 and was the first to be released under King's pen name, Richard Bachman. This is one of King's most controversial publications, and due to the nature of the content we will be covering, I will be refraining from my usual shenaniganizing and tomfoolery. It's one thing to have a good laugh when talking about pubescent telepaths or vampires, but this novel isn't about the supernatural or the fantastic. It's about mental illness, gun violence, and in particular, gun violence in schools. These are topics that I simply cannot in good conscience make light of. Yep, this is it's going to be a real bummer of a video. We will also be taking a look at the 2013 nonfiction anti-firearms violence essay by King entitled Guns, following the Rage portion of this video. Rage. Synopsis as provided within the novel. The sly voices in his mind whispered their terrible warnings, telling Charlie exactly what he had to do. And one by one, the students filed into the room, laughing, talking, never suspecting that today's class would be like no other. For today, Charlie would lead them in his savagely dangerous game of show and tell. And all their secrets would explode into a nightmare of violence and terror. Rage, a powerfully charged novel that explores the darker ranges of the mind and the horror of sadistic manipulation. History and inspiration. Rage was originally entitled Getting It On, but the title was changed before publication. It was first published in 1976 and then was collected in 1985 in the hardcover omnibus, The Bachman Books. The novel describes a school shooting and has been associated with actual high school shooting incidents in the 1980s and 90s. King has long since pulled the novel from publication, however, it is very easy to find a copy online these days. The following information regarding the numerous school shooters and aspiring school shooters has been pulled straight off of Wikipedia, and quite frankly, it's pretty upsetting. I won't be using any of the names of the perpetrators, however, because f*** them, they will not get any recognition from me. A senior at San Gabriel High School in San Gabriel, California, took an AR-15 style rifle to school on April 26, 1988, and held a humanities class of about 60 students hostage for over 30 minutes. He held the gun to one student when the teacher doubted he would cause harm and stated that he would prove it to her. At that time, 3 students escaped out a rear door and were fired upon. The gunman was later tackled and disarmed by another student. A friend of the gunman told the press that the gunman had been inspired by the Kuwait Airways Flight 422 hijacking and by the novel Rage, which the gunman had read over and over again and with which he strongly identified. A senior at Jackson County High School in McKee, Kentucky, armed himself with a shotgun and 2 handguns and took a history classroom hostage in a 9-hour standoff with police on September 18, 1989, that ended without injury. Police found a copy of Rage among the possessions in the gunman's bedroom, leading to speculation that he had been inspired to carry out the plot of the novel. On January 18, 1993, a student at East Carter High School in Grayson, Kentucky, took a .38 caliber revolver that was owned by his father and fatally shot his English teacher in the head during her 7th period class. He subsequently shot and killed the school's custodian and held the class hostage for 20 minutes before releasing them. Just before the shooting, he had written an essay on rage and was upset that his teacher had given it a C grade. A student at Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington, walked from his house to the school on February 2, 1996, and entered his algebra classroom during fifth period. He opened fire on students, killing 2 and wounding another. He then fatally shot his algebra teacher in the chest. As his classmates' shock turned to panic, the gunman reportedly said, "This sure beats algebra, doesn't it?" A line erroneously believed to be taken from Rage. No such line appears in King's story. The closest is when Charlie Decker quips, "This sure beats panty raids." Hearing the gunshots, the gym coach entered the classroom. The shooter was holding his classmates hostage and planned to use one hostage so he could safely exit the school. The gym coach volunteered to be the hostage, and the shooter kept the coach at gunpoint with his rifle. The coach then grabbed the weapon from the shooter, wrestled him to the ground, and then assisted the evacuation of the students. In December 1997, a gunman shot 8 fellow students, 3 of them fatally, at a prayer meeting at Heath High School in West Paducah, Kentucky. He had a copy of Rage within the Richard Bachman omnibus in his locker. This was the incident that moved King to allow the book to go out of print. I can't imagine what King must have felt knowing that a work of fiction he had released had potentially inspired so many violent acts and caused the deaths of numerous individuals. Certain pieces of fiction have an ability to speak to an unstable minority and can in fact act as a trigger, or in cases such as this, a playbook of sorts. The overview. I don't want to go through the story in any detail. It would feel like going against King's wishes in a way. He explicitly does not want people to be influenced or impacted by it, so instead I want to briefly discuss my feelings of the book and the topic therein. Rage is the summation of the humans are the real monsters trope. King so often relies on otherworldly creatures and metaphysical terror to tell his stories, but it's no surprise that the most disturbing, controversial book he has ever written doesn't have ghouls, goblins, or ghosts, just an unstable young man that went off the deep end. It's true, though, isn't it, that the real monsters are men? I've certainly told my kids there is no such thing as monsters, nothing to be afraid of, but have followed that statement, warning them of the fact that there are bad people out there who, whether it be due to mental illness or evil intent, are in fact dangerous and cause for caution. Rage is a tough read even for someone like myself with a fairly thick skin, and it's the human element that makes it hard to digest. In this day and age, it's all a little too real. Final thoughts. I applaud King for his decision to pull the book from publication. Typically, I'm not in favor of banning or canceling books, but for King to make the call himself after realizing it was potentially dangerous, and in some cases actually dangerous, this was an incredibly respectable and responsible thing to do. King went a step further with his 2013 short essay, Guns, which we will be discussing now. Guns, 2013. In Guns, King addresses the aforementioned incidents that were inspired by rage and examines America's culture of violence, the media, the NRA, the Second Amendment, and gun control. It isn't uncommon for King to be vocal online about his political leanings or ideologies, and any time he expresses his feelings about an even remotely controversial issue, you will reliably find multiple people in the comments section telling him to do what is essentially the writer's equivalent of shut up and dribble. That, of course, has never managed to deter him. Much like his remarks online, King is unapologetic in guns. However, I find that he holds opinions on the subject that would upset liberals just as often as they would right-wing gun nuts. In my opinion, nothing he says should be considered wildly controversial, but in this country, having an opinion that doesn't explicitly side with one party or the other is tricky business. Not to say he is neutral or centrist on any particular issue, but rather he highlights the flaws, shortcomings, and oversights that both the center-left and far-right espouse. His position is what many would refer to as advocating for common-sense gun control regulations. He believes that the gun-toting cat has been out of the bag for far too long, and that trying to stuff it back in at this point would be an exercise in futility. King delivers stats, facts, and data to back up his assertions as well. What he presents isn't simply how he feels or what he believes. It's the cold hard truth about where we are as a society and what can reasonably be accomplished to stop the bloodshed, or at the very least, minimize the likelihood of mass shootings in the U.S. Final thoughts. This is a short read, and if the topic is at all of interest to you, I recommend checking it out. I didn't always agree with King on an emotional level, but he leaves little room for argument when all is said and done. Alright, that does it for what will easily be the least fun video I do on this channel. Coming up next, we will be digging into King's third novel, The Shining, and all the movies, graphic novels, and TV series it inspired, as well as the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty pleased with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.